Okay, session 6, which is titled Amplifying Action in Counter Wildlife Trafficking, Leveraging Regional, National, and Local Efforts Through Partnership. So what's that mean? Well, we just finished session 5, where we heard about the commitment by 10 member states, environment ministers in any case, to a regional action plan to improve CWT at the national and regional levels, which is in development. And that builds on previous agreements and CW efforts since dating back to like 2004. We also heard back from some panelists on that, on some suggestions. I'm sure some of you were in that session. For those of you who weren't, please do watch the recording, but some of the takeaways were you can even build on a ministerial statement to the next level and to a legally binding agreement while the regional action plan is being meted out. Also, that we need some clarity on the vision of the outcomes of the different pillars. And this really dovetails really nicely into this session because we've got some actors, we got some programs and some institutions that have their own efforts going on to CWT, ASEAN-based initiatives that can be leveraged to possibly join in, coordinate, or help implement what the 10 ASEAN member states have committed to. So joining us first, we're very lucky to have BAC Jim Wee, the Executive Director of ASEANapol Secretariat, which is the official police network in Southeast Asia, and which has also made counter wildlife trafficking a priority issue, which is a very exciting and meaningful development for this region. Executive Director Wee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve, for the introduction, and a very good morning to everyone participating in this event. And thank you, Peter, for getting us to join in to share our views. Well, just to write on the development of the earlier session, I think I was hearing some of the session from some of the speakers. I'm just trying to write on of what has been spoken. I think wildlife trafficking or wildlife trading is not new. Is an old trade that has been happening for many years, and sadly to say that this trade has been rooted so much, and probably because of the lucrative rate gains, and probably because of the demands. Whenever there's demands, there's needs, you know. So these are all opportunities for many people itself. Well, at the end of the session, I hope that I can share a bit of what ASEANapol is doing. I'm actually representing the ASEANapol National Police in the ASEAN site itself. I'd like to share that actually for the last decade, actually before that, we've been assisting in this group for about 40 years itself. But in the last decade, the ASEANapol have worked through the Secretariat. I'm actually from the Secretariat. So we're actually helping to coordinate programs for the ASEAN police itself. And then we actually have been working pretty hard to actually encourage member countries to increase the effort in the crackdown of the wildlife crime, including initiative of strategic collaborations and partnership with non-profit entities and associations in the effort to find the best practices and approach to combat such crime, not just regionally, but globally. Because the demand not just originate from the region or comes from the region, but it goes globally as well. So, well, we may know that there's a lot of discussion, talks, and plans strategically at the high level, at the ministry level itself. But then we may not see the progress as we want to expect itself. I think I just want to highlight that from the policing perspective, in the ASEANapol itself, we have actually got many other crime areas to cover as well. So wildlife trafficking is one of them itself. So then again, depends on the priority. I guess people will understand the priorities of the country concerned, or in the region or globally, and it also depends on the timing itself. Why this thing is not progressing as fast as possible itself. And of course, I think I'd like to share that it's also the meeting the right people, getting the right context to run the program itself. Well, I also like to move on is that I agree to some of the speakers earlier on is that the implementation has to have some great impact, and then with the great impact, then it can contribute to reduce the crime itself. While different focus at different time is different, but I would like to share that the wildlife trafficking or wildlife trading, actually behind it, what we as the ASEAN Nepal actually wants to focus on is basically the organized crime syndicate that's behind it itself. Often or not, wildlife trafficking or the other trade of crime like illicit drug trafficking, trafficking persons, all this involve the transnational organized crime syndicates itself. And why I say that is because these syndicates are basically the one that actually want to harp on the opportunity, and then they will take advantage of the terrain, the situation of the country, and then exploit all these people to get all the illegal gains. And then after that, they enjoy the illegal gains that they have from the trading itself. Okay, I guess beginning of last year, with the sudden eruption of the COVID-19 pandemic, we perhaps have noticed that the focus on wildlife trafficking or trading is put on more focus or more spot on because of the zoonotic disease, which basically the discussion has been ongoing that COVID-19 could have spread through zoonotic diseases itself. So from the ASEAN Nepal perspective, every year we actually have got an annual meeting. And in this annual meeting, we actually put in a commitment by the 10 member country on how to develop to fight against this wildlife trafficking itself. Basically, we actually committed in a joint communique where we basically state that we will continue the existing bilateral and multilateral cooperation among our ASEAN Nepal member country, including but not limited to conducting joint and coordinate investigation or operation in accordance with respective domestic laws in the fight against wildlife crime. We also agreed to actively participate in various capacity building programs and training provided by the ASEAN Nepal member country, our dialogue partners, observers, for gaining experiences from experts at regional and international level. We also actually agreed to participate in international regional campaign against wildlife crime in order to create more awareness to the public. And of course, we also internally at the secretariat level, we also try to encourage the sharing of information of this wildlife trafficking through our existing channel of our database communication channel, whereby we can share information in a more secure manner with each other. And we are also trying to group the right people that is managing this wildlife crime issue at the police level, so that we can share the correct information and then we can get the action done properly itself. So as part of our ongoing effort, beside the joint communique, at the secretariat level, we are also working hand in hand with non-profit organization. I think recently we're lucky enough to actually get engaged with USAID Wildlife, and I think finding the right partners, right spirit, right camaraderies, we managed to actually work out a program recently that happens between 8 to 10 of June 2021, whereby we conduct a wildlife program that we have USAID Wildlife Asia to come in to help share experiences, conduct a bit of training. Basically, the secretary is trying to start off with some training perspective for the correct group of people that is from the police side. The police side may be coordinating with other agencies. We know that fighting wildlife crime is not just only a police issue. It also involves other authorities within the country concerned. In some country, they have a wildlife authority, and this wildlife authority actually basically will take lead or take charge, but police will participate as one of the partners itself. So in our plans that we have is actually to join the 10 member country police who is actually involved in this wildlife trafficking with their partners in their own respective country. And then from there, we're actually trying to move on next to have some form of a case study program, where the case study could be the past case study, or it could be something new that we want to develop on. And we actually probably in the near future, we're actually looking at working closely with freelance. We have some discussion ongoing now. Perhaps we can work out some more detailed training, and to get all this grouping together from the ASEAN Nepal member country that's tackling this wildlife crime issue. And then from there, we work on to develop how can we actually do some operations to actually crack down. Basically, we want to crack down the organized crime syndicate behind this wildlife trading itself. So we are also trying to work with more non-profit organization that is actually helping or doing in wildlife crime, because we realize that some information passed to them is more informative than us getting the information ourselves. So so that's why I said from this forum, we also looking forward or trying to tell people that we have this organization, ASEAN Nepal, and we have this secretariat that's available for discussion. And if you do have any programs or any things that you want to actually work with us, do contact us itself, and we are definitely positive enough to actually look forward to work together. I think we have some successful working partnership with USAID Wildlife Asia as well as freelance. So we look forward for more collaboration with other agencies. So, well, just to round up what I have for today, I'd like to share that crimes are always there, be it domestic crime or transnational crime. We have been through COVID-19 pandemic, and now most countries are actually moving into the endemic era. Crimes are just like COVID-19. It will remain there even though we move into the endemic era. Crimes will never be wiped out. So thus, most importantly, we, the police, need to consistently work with CWT partners to fight against illicit wildlife crime so as to cripple the major transnational organized crime syndicate. We also need to evolve our traditional ways and thinking to fight against such organized crime. So that's why we need to think out of the box. From the secretariat, we always try to think out of the box what we can do besides following the normal protocol itself. What else can we have? Believe it or not, you will not be expected that you'll be expected that more organized crime would have expanded their business during this time, and then perhaps they will have moved on to actually get involved in legitimate business as their front, so as to allow them to legitimately take the opportunity to do their money laundering from the crime proceed. So we are working hard to work with partners, trying to cripple them. So from secretariat point of view, the relationship and networking among the strategic smart partners should be carried on and be on a regular basis. Each should just play our role in their respective implementation of their program. For example, police focusing on sharing information and crippling organized crime syndicate where possible. At the national level, continuous education of the people and improving the country's economy also need to be ongoing. If possible, further reviews of the laws to enhance the system and making it more difficult for the organized crime syndicate. For example, implementation of the Money Laundering Act itself at the national level, so that you can make it more difficult. So being in the CWT community, we need to be even more cohesive to our information sharing and program implementation. While we may not have stopped the crime completely, but at least we do our best to bring down the crime and stop the transnational organized crime syndicates. Having said so, the Secretariat Office on behalf of Senator Paul looks forward to more opportunities to collaborate and work on any implementable projects that we could help or facilitate, such that we can work together to bring this trade down to the minimum and keeping the region safe. That's all I have to share for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, DAC Jim Wee, Executive Director of ASEANAPOL Secretariat. I know a lot of organizations, including ours, who've worked on counter wildlife trafficking are extremely excited that ASEANAPOL is getting more involved in combating wildlife trafficking. This is the official police network for Southeast Asia. And we just heard in the previous session about the ASEAN ministerial statement that came from the environmental sector wanting to reach out to other conventional law enforcement bodies to build a regional approach. So we definitely need to come back to you in a few moments after we hear from some others. We also have with us today another institution based in ASEAN, and similar to DAC Jim Wee, is the boss of the organization, showing political commitment. This institution, the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, is the regional body for law and policy makers for ASEAN. And they've been also very interested and much more involved now in looking at the problem of wildlife trafficking. We're really lucky to have us with today the Secretary General of AIPA. Ms. Van, the floor is over to you. I believe you're coming to us from Jakarta. Good to see you.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning to everyone. I'm joining this forum from Jakarta. First of all, please allow me to extend to all of you the warmest greetings from the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly. I also wish to express my sincere thanks to USAID for inviting me to join this forum. I will be speaking about the role and engagement of the ASEAN parliamentarians in combating the wildlife trade and COVID-19 pandemic. Can someone from the technical teams turn to the next page, please? As you all know that the Southeast Asia is a global hotspot for wildlife crime and a regional transportation hub for protected wildlife and wildlife products. The borders throughout ASEAN suffer from uneven enforcement, loopholes, and weak penalties for violators of wildlife trafficking. Next page, please. Over the past 2 decades, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has facilitated strategic responses to an emerging non-traditional security threat in the region, including wildlife trafficking. In 2005, with the creation of the ASEAN's Wildlife Enforcement Network, the fight against biodiversity exploitations and trafficking of endangered wildlife species within and throughout the regions has brought to a higher level. Next slide, please. The ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, consisting of member parliament from 10 countries in Southeast Asia, has played an instrumental role in familiarizing the people of Southeast Asia with goals and priorities of ASEAN Community Vision 2025. AIPA has reinforced the region commitment to combat cross-border crime and significantly has included wildlife trafficking of wildlife, putting them on par with other transnational crimes. In 2012, the ASEAN parliamentarians passed resolutions to support Wildlife Enforcement Network, its national task force, and the implementations of the Asia regional response to endangered species trafficking. Next slide, please. During the 34th AIPA General Assembly in 2013, the Legislative Council of Brunei formally hosted a meeting with ASEAN WAN member of the USAID funded program, Asia Regional Response to Endangered Species, trafficking, and Asean Wildlife emphasize the AIPA leading role in providing direct support to national task force. In this process, Freeland, the implementing partner, call on AIPA leaders to discuss concrete partnership engagement, such as policy support to national parliament, joint fundraising, and capacity building activities. Together with governmental efforts supporting the harmonizations of environmental law to combat transnational crime and wildlife crime, in 2015, AIPA General Assembly approved a resolution to strengthen law enforcement and regional cooperation in order to combat wildlife crime. Member parliaments have emphasized the importance of reform of their regulations in order to stop wildlife trafficking and protect biodiversity in the region from extinction, as well as discuss on national initiative and possible common legislations. Next slide, please. In 2016, AIPA also held the 8th caucus meetings in Lao PDR, which aim to determine areas where harmonization of law is necessary in this region. The legislators discussed wildlife and CITES implementations. Next slide, please. In the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, AIPA, in coordination with external stakeholders, including Asean, USAID, Freelance, ICCF, UNODC, and other relevant agencies, conducted discussion and dialogues on effort to end the pandemic through legislative initiatives in order to create a regional legislative framework to combat wildlife trafficking as the origin of the pandemic. Next slide, please. Recently, in the first week of 2021, AIPA co-organized on health approach webinar with Freeland, focusing on long-term solutions to that combine human health, animal health, and ecosystem health. In May 2020, AIPA and Freeland also jointly organized a webinar on wildlife trade and the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic for supporting staff of AIPA National Parliament and AIPA Secretariat. Next slide, please. In June 2020, AIPA co-hosted with ICCF the virtual briefing on the origins of COVID-19, preventing future pandemics, and the wildlife trade, with the active participation of parliamentarians from all AIPA member parliaments. The outcome of the hearing was that member parliaments from across Southeast Asia was better informed on the linkages between the wildlife issues, illegal trafficking, and the prevention of the next pandemic. And they are better prepared to continue tackling these challenges. This event was an important part to progress the collective efforts of the international and regional law enforcement agency and strengthen the legal framework to effectively address the problem. Next slide, please. From the point, this is the pictures about the virtual briefing between AIPA and ICCF. I already mentioned. Next slide, please. From the perspective of AIPA, we would like to provide some recommendations, such as we should continue to place wildlife crime onto the permanent agendas of ASEAN and AIPA. Call upon AIPA member parliaments to review, upgrade their wildlife and criminal legislation to maximize the deterrence of illegal wildlife trafficking. Call upon AIPA member Parliament to take appropriate measure to support law enforcement agency by ensuring that financial and legal frameworks are in place to adequately support their work. We continue to encourage the creations of AIPA national parliamentary groups or caucuses in the AIPA member parliament to provide oversight in the implementations of national strategy in coping wildlife crime. We highly appreciate and continue to establish and continue joint program in coordination with stakeholders such as USAID, Freeland, ICCF, and other partners to form the AIPA platforms where members of the parliament can share their country-specific results, good practices on counter wildlife trafficking. In this process, I think that the cross-sectoral and cross-pillar ASEAN cooperations on wildlife trafficking is really important. So we need to encourage the cooperation among all the sectors and pillars within ASEAN. Lastly, to encourage roles of the MP and the social media in public awareness raising on wildlife trafficking and links with the pandemic. So ladies and gentlemen, with ASEAN Community Vision 2025 coming into effect in the next few years, the need for improving national laws and creating a proper regional legislative framework to combat wildlife crime is becoming increasingly urgent. I think there is still much to work to be done as the counter wildlife trafficking is still facing a number of challenges, such as the lack of political will in some countries, corruptions, the need to amend legislations or to adopt new laws in wildlife conservation and management, and combating wildlife trafficking around the world, especially in area. We also see failures of the law enforcement in capability. So I think that COVID-19's pandemic as a wake-up call, and we need to be proactive by focusing on promoting and scaling up pandemic long-term and sustainable prevention solutions. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing your contribution during this this webinar. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Secretary General. You always amaze me. You and your institution are clearly very busy on this. There was a lot of events. You're on top of this, got the caucus going. Basically, this links back to a remark from our previous session in which it was pointed out by the director of IUCN that it's very important for us to look at policies and laws enabling conditions, and you're the body that is doing that. Similarly, the previous speaker, Executive Director Jim Wee from ASEANapol and his institution are ramping up efforts as the police network. So this also fills in another gap. And in a couple speakers from now, we'll also hear about judges. Before we do that, though, let's go to Dr. Theresa Mandido Lim, who is a real pioneer in this field. She's coming to us from the Philippines. She's now the executive director of the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, but she's been in this game, if you will, for a long time. She was part of the original ASEAN WEN from her position in the government of the Philippines, and has been working across borders with other stakeholders for many years. We're really lucky to have you here, and we would like you to tell us a little bit more about ACB and how it could possibly dovetail with the commitments from the ministers across the region. Over to you, Dr. Lim.
Thank you very much, Steve. You really make me feel old. Okay, so good day, everyone. The ASEAN Center for Biodiversity is delighted to be part of this very important conversation. I'd like to express our appreciation to the government of Thailand, to the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, the ASEAN Secretariat, and USAID Wildlife Asia and their partners for organizing this event. As His Excellency Lim Jock Hoi, the Secretary General of the ASEAN, affirmed in his opening remarks yesterday, it is known that the ASEAN region is blessed with rich biodiversity. Of the known 24,889 species assessed in the ASEAN, more than 9,000 or 37% are found nowhere else in the world except in the ASEAN. The ASEAN region is also at the center of the East Asian Australasian Flyway, a route traversed by 50 million migratory water birds from 250 species populations, many of which are classified as globally threatened birds. The region is also a breeding and feeding ground for charismatic marine species and highly migratory wild fish. Unfortunately, because we have unique and diverse wildlife species and a haven for wildlife as they travel across the world, the region has also become vulnerable to wildlife trafficking. The ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, or the ACB, was established by the 10 ASEAN member states in 2005 to respond to the challenges of biodiversity loss, including loss of species diversity, by facilitating cooperation and coordination among the ASEAN member states. Among the actions of the ACB is contributing to an integrated approach in support of the region's efforts to counter wildlife trafficking and aligned with the plan of action of the ASEAN Working Group on CITES WE, which include, among others, strengthening the science policy interface and addressing both the demand through public awareness and the supply, particularly at the source. Are my slides? Sorry, can you move the slides forward, please? Okay. The ACB, together with some of the ASEAN region's dialogue and development partners, supports the AMS in ensuring that protected areas are effectively managed, and these areas as wildlife habitats are conserved and protected. This support is channeled through various programs, particularly one of our banner programs, the ASEAN Heritage Parks Program. The ACB conducts and facilitates, next slide, training on wildlife monitoring and provide enforcement equipment to several AHPs and protected areas based on country priorities. Under our Biodiversity Conservation and Management of Protected Areas in the ASEAN, or the BCAMP project of the ACB and the European Union. The ACB also supports strengthening community-based monitoring of illegal activities through active local community engagement to complement national level enforcement actions. The center also promotes citizen science and provides opportunities for relevant academic research to be translated into actionable areas on the ground. Our collaboration with experts and development organizations to improve the taxonomic capacities of local stakeholders in the AHPs has resulted in the development of field guidebooks and the enhancement of existing databases. We hope that by strengthening mechanisms to protect natural ecosystems at the field, we can help prevent the wildlife from being taken out of its habitat and keep them off the market and into the hands of vendors, thus reducing unnecessary close contact with the public. As poverty and lack of opportunities drive communities to resort to illegal wildlife trade, providing socioeconomic support to communities through alternative livelihood and capacity development programs is also crucial. The ASEAN Heritage Parks program ASEAN Heritage Parks act as our demonstration sites where we work with communities to enhance livelihoods and reduce pressure on wild populations from poaching and human-wildlife conflicts, building capacities so that communities can continue to become partners in protecting nature. In partnership with the German Development Bank, or the KfW, the ACB awards grants to local organizations to support initiatives that balance biodiversity conservation and sustainable livelihood interventions, encouraging the active participation of the local population in the protection and management of the AHPs. We have also had successes in implementing a biodiversity-based products project in partnership with the German government that supports villages around protected areas in developing new additional livelihood from local biodiversity resources. Efforts should also leverage raising awareness and changing behaviors and attitude, including consumer groups towards wildlife trade. The ACB has organized and supported the participation of ASEAN member states in regional virtual public sessions on the interlinkages between zoonotic diseases, biodiversity conservation, and human health to broaden the discourse among the AMS across sectors and engage a wider audience through the media. We also have the ASEAN Youth for Biodiversity program that empowers young people to be our allies towards behavioral change that promote conservation and sustainable management of our natural assets. They themselves are consumers and influencers who can play a leading role in the fight against poaching and wildlife trade. The ACB plays a unique role in facilitating transboundary collaboration and regional cooperation to address biodiversity loss through the sharing of biodiversity information, knowledge, and good practices, including among protected areas under multiple jurisdictions, but share ecological ranges for wildlife species. In pursuing its mandate, the ACB underscores the ASEAN's priority on cross-sectoral collaboration and multilateralism to effectively mainstream biodiversity in various decision-making processes towards recovery, in line with the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. This year, the ACB also launched the hashtag We Are ASEAN Biodiversity campaign to gather stories of dedication, hardships, and successes in protecting and conserving biodiversity. It is hoped that generating broader stakeholder support will also enhance our efforts to reach out across pillars and sectors in the ASEAN to achieve our common vision. Thank you and have a good day ahead. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Dr. Lim, for sharing with us about the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, which is really the institutional memory and database for the region on what biodiversity is here, and providing advice and technical direct support to the implementation of biodiversity protection. We're going to be coming back to you in a moment after we hear from our final panelists to see how we can knit all this together. So thank you. Also coming to us from Manila today is Ms. Bryony Eels, who's with the ASEAN Development Bank. And Ms. Eels, you will be speaking to us about the Asian Judges Network on Environment and its work on counter wildlife trafficking. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve. So hi, everyone. I'm Bryony Eels. I am the team leader for environmental and climate change law judicial capacity building within the Asian Development Bank. And thank you for having us here. I work within ADB's law and policy reform program, and we have worked with judges in Asia and the Pacific for a decade, supporting them with the adjudication of environmental law and climate change disputes. The reason we started this work a decade ago is that we realized the critical nature of judges as development partners. So often money is channeled into legal reform or working with enforcement agencies, as it should, but judges can be left out of the conversation. And if you think about them, it's hard to uphold the law, the rule of law, without well-skilled judges. So judges, their role in government is really as gatekeepers. So sometimes even emergency managers for climate change and environment. And so in short, without skillful judges, sometimes prosecutions fail or you get inadequate remedies. And that's why we do the work that we do. On the flip side, we actually also do work with environmental law trainers. And obviously, if there's no one there to seek enforcement of laws, then the whole system fails as well. So ADB has built a network of environmental law educators across Asia and the Pacific. And we frequently offer train the trainer programs to environmental law teachers, trainers, and practitioners. Over the last 4 years, actually, we spent 4 years studying climate law, policy, and litigation across Asia and the Pacific. Now, we published the results of our research late last year in a 4-part report series entitled Climate Change Coming Soon to a Court Near You. And a primary goal with that was the sharing of knowledge so that practitioners and lawyers in complementary jurisdictions dealing with similar issues could see what legal frameworks were in surrounding countries, but also how other judges deal with similar issues. So while the reports do focus on climate law, we actually cover biodiversity conservation litigation. Let's face it, protecting endemic species boosts ecosystem resilience, and that enhances adaptation action across Asia and the Pacific. And preventing the illegal trade of wildlife is also essential for biodiversity protection. So it's important for judges to see the whole picture. I've asked somebody to post the web address in the chat of that report series. So let me just move now to the next phase of what we're doing over the next 4 years of our program. And that's why we're so grateful to be part of this discussion. Over the next 4 years, we will continue to work very closely with judges in Asia and the Pacific to provide more in-depth and sustainable support to their judicial education programs. And what that means is that we will create tailored curricula and work with national judicial academies, also hopefully regional, the regional body of the Council of Asean Chief Justices, so that we can embed environmental and climate law curriculum within their training programs. An important part of that curriculum are modules on the illegal trade of wildlife. So we will embed that. We know there are other development partners who have been specializing in building capacity on counter wildlife trafficking. Indeed, we have a team at ADB, Sassy Fisher and Francesco Riccardi, who work with environmental prosecutors, and they are speaking in session 8. But what we really want is we're hoping to collaborate with other development partners to learn about their experience in working in these programs, even with judges. It's really important for us to understand, what works. What is it that judges need to know so that we can actually embed that in the judicial curriculum, and we can embed it in the training and give a broader perspective. Another aspect of what we do is the creation of networks. So our team has worked on AJNE, which is the Asian Judges Network on Environment. And we created this network to give environmental law judges a community of peers. They often get isolated, and it's important to bring them together in regional events, which is what we do, but to create relationships between them so that they can share ideas. As I mentioned, we also do, and I've asked as well for the chat box to have a link to the AJNE website. On that AJNE website, we have resources. Over the next phase of our program, we're hoping to ramp that up with more information about regional laws and jurisprudence. We have also created a dedicated website for environmental law champions across Asia and the Pacific. And that provides access to online webinars and online training programs, which people are able to do as certificate courses through ADB eLearn. So I've also asked for the website, that's teachenvirolaw.asia, to be placed in the chat. So I guess in summary, I really just wanted to say it is really important to keep judges in this conversation. They're the ones who you have to run the matters for before at court. And that's why we are so passionate about the program that we run. But we are looking to collaborate with other partners. Our program is very broad, and counter wildlife trafficking is one element. So, please allow us to learn from the wisdom of other development partners who have been doing this. So thank you again so much for the time to talk today.
Thanks, Bryony. Please stay with us because I'm going to ask a question to everybody, but thanks for sharing with us what the Asian Development Bank is doing, and specifically the work on the ASEAN Judges Network. Critically important, as you say, So we've heard now, building on last session, where it was made clear that there is a commitment across the region. Some say that could be strengthened through a more legally binding agreement, but still we have a ministerial statement which triggered the formation of a regional action plan on this issue. And we also have heard now that, there's ASEANapol with the police network. We've got a judges network. We've got the regional, body ACB that has really got the institutional knowledge on what biodiversity is here and what needs to be done about it. And we also have the policy and lawmakers who can enable all of this and drive this, as has been done even to the prime ministerial level, which was done earlier this year with last year with Vietnam. So how do we converge all this? How do we bring it all together? Is there a way? Is it practical to bridge the programs and structures that we've heard about today and in the last session to realize some common goals? I know that's easier said than done, but and if it's difficult, what are the barriers? Because there seems to be a lot of expertise, common goals, some resources. How do we bring it all together? And that's a question I'm just going to put out to anybody here, if anybody wants to take a first stab at that. Also, if there's anything that you heard from the other speakers that you want to build on as a separate question or issue, please dive in now.
Maybe Steve, I can have the first go.
Dr. Lim, please.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Actually, the ASEAN has provided us already a number of guidance from the ASEAN leaders, from the different ASEAN bodies, and in recent years, and especially with the adoption of the ACRF, it's already promoting cross-sectoral and cross-pillar collaboration within ASEAN. It's not as easy as it sounds because we're still, starting to do that. But the ASEAN Secretariat has been very supportive of this cross-sectoral collaboration because what we have noticed in the past is if we had specific activities that would involve other pillars or other sectors, we work through the ASEAN Secretariat to make sure that the other bodies would be involved in the coordination and in the consultations. So this is the approach that we are taking at the moment. Of course, always anchoring on leader statement on policies that are issued at the ministerial or at the leadership level. I think the guidance is already there. It's just important on how we will be able to operationalize it, and it would really require us reaching out across the fence, across pillars.
Okay. All right. So this is support and guidance from the ASEAN Secretariat on cross-sectoral approaches. And as you say, operationalizing that's not always easy. Is there any other thoughts on this question or anything else that you guys wanted to say and didn't get a chance to say? Because I have a question in case you don't, but does anybody want to add any comments?
Yes, sorry, no, I'll defer to.
Brownie, that's okay, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess from our perspective, it's really important for judges to get a more holistic perspective. So while it can be, as Dr. Mandita Lim mentioned, it can be hard to get that collaboration. It can also be informal, excuse me. So, when we do our training, when we do our curriculum, it's important to have speakers from outside the judicial world who can come in and explain some of the challenges so that perspective is given. So I'm very much giving you a perspective on what we need, but I think that's relevant to understand, to get that holistic perspective. And then possibly, I can't speak for judiciaries in terms of their willingness to participate, but some are really willing to be involved and would like to be consulted, because there are certainly things that they would like other agencies to understand about when they bring a matter before court, what they need to see. So I think that cross-fertilization of ideas and that interchange could be informal as well as something that's institutionalized.
Very good. Yeah, excellent point. And Executive Director Wee, you made reference in your intervention earlier to an event that I think was back in June, hosted by ASEANapol, which we also participated in. That was excellent. It was not a public event, it was closed, but there was law enforcement, police, and other law enforcement agencies from across the region, and also from other countries, including the United States and China and Europe. It was quite big. And you talked about, what's needed to step up on counter wildlife trafficking, with ASEANapol playing a pivotal role there. And I think it's worth mentioning that Madam Secretary General from AIPA was also there listening, saying that, she's taking notes on. So that's the kind of thing I'm wondering. It seems like the different bodies are starting to hook up. We heard in the last session from the Regional Plan of Action that they are encouraging, like Dr. Mandido Lim just said from the ASEAN Secretariat, cross-sectoral approach. Do you have any thoughts to share about opportunities or difficulties in operationalizing this? We just heard about the informal approach, which I think is super important, can sometimes get around the red tape, but is there anything else that you would like to add for today?
Well, I just want to share is that, existingly, I think we have a lot of mechanism, a lot of program that's already in place and trying to be implemented and run itself. Then countering on this wildlife trading or trafficking itself, some may be managed by certain authorities itself. I would like to let everybody be aware that behind this activity, actually, the police, what we're looking for is actually not just crippling these activities, but we want to cripple the transnational organized crime syndicates that are actually behind this whole operation itself. So while certain authorities may have crippled or stopped certain trading in the progress between countries, do bear in mind that actually they should actually look further than that and probably work with the local police or the respective police in their country to develop and see the syndicate that's behind this itself, and how can we actually cripple them. I think if you cripple the roots, or you grab hold of the root, or you wipe out the roots itself of these syndicates, then you probably can reduce this type of trading that's going on itself. I guess if, let's say, there's demand for this wildlife trafficking, by now it should be all the legitimate way itself. They are actually engineered way of grooming these needs for this wildlife itself in certain countries itself. But of course, the illegal one, they do it because of the opportunity itself. So I just want to let all organizations or all groups that are actually participating in this wildlife trading or trafficking to reduce them, bear in mind the bigger group that's behind it itself. We can have all the strategy, but so when you implement it, there's still a need to talk with others itself. I mean, from the Secretariat, we actually open to everyone down here, the participant, the speakers itself. We are here available. So let us know how to work together if you have any information itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Wee. And earlier in your intervention, I think it's worth restating that you also opened up to civil society, which you recognize has a lot of information on this trade. And ASEANapol is interested to build up your database to help crack down on these illicit supply chains, these crooks. So we are running over time. So I think we've covered a lot here. There is a question. I do want to respect the audience. We won't be able to get to all of them, but Bryony, your team can collaborate with the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau for understanding the Indian judicial system and partner with judicial academies to sensitize the Indian judiciary. This comes from Girisha, the joint director of the WCCB in India. So just pointing that out, that's in the chat for you to recognize. And I think we are going to now finish. This has been recorded. I want to point out a lot of our listeners and watchers have been overseas. It's quite late there, but the numbers on this Zoom have not gone down very much at all. We've got still like 225 people. That's a big Zoom. So obviously very interesting for everybody. And I just want to thank you all for joining, building on last session. This has been really important. I think we definitely got to take note of everything that was said here. And this will be very important for the next follow-on sessions, including tomorrow. So I want to now hand this back over to Veronica. Veronica, are you there?
I am indeed. Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks very much indeed to all the panelists. We've got to the end of day 2. And I think it's really worth remarking how well today's session has set us up for tomorrow, which will be a big day. It's the finale, of course, bringing in the donors and development partners to be in a dialogue with ASEAN and the countries to discuss the way forward. We'll also first try to tackle this question of what should be the counter-wildlife trafficking response to COVID-19 and the continuing risks of zoonotic disease and future pandemics. Specifically, tomorrow's dialogue will also focus on the current CWT landscape, the impacts of COVID, priorities in a post-COVID world, partner plans, and opportunities to strengthen coordination mechanisms moving forward. There will also be a presentation highlighting the outcomes of the development partner discussions. Session 7 will be about the post-COVID world, pivots and actions. Session 8, entering a new era of regional partnership, development partner plans and programs. Session 9 will be ASEAN country development partner dialogue, converging country and donor priorities and coordinated action. Just a final thank you to our hosts, the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, Thailand, and USAID Wildlife Asia in collaboration with WWF, the ASEAN Secretariat, the Asian Development Bank, World Bank's Global Wildlife Programme, Global Environmental Facility, and the United Nations Development Programme. See you all tomorrow for another very rich discussion on counter-wildlife trafficking within a partnership forum.